So I've got the graveyard slot really, haven't I? Last one of the afternoon. Should sort of dish out a little tray of espressos just to keep it awake for 20 minutes. Though the advantage is there's never usually too many questions. Everyone runs off to do the school run. Okay, so just to introduce myself, I'm Mark Woods. I'm a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Health. My background as a professional was in nursing, and I've been in sort of full-time education for just over, well, actually 2.5 years. It's quite scary how quick it goes. And one of the things, obviously, I've completed Department Development is the PG Cert. And so for sort of my kind of pedagogic study, my research, I kind of looked at student engagement with virtual learning environments. So I'm just kind of going to present sort of the results that towards the end in this presentation. But I just explain a little bit of the background to it and the virtual learning environment I'm sort of focusing on, which is WIMBA in particular, and just some of our understanding of how virtual learning environments work now, and kind of if what I found from students tallied with what some of the data tells us, and then obviously I'd avoid any questions at the end. Cool. Okay, so what do we mean by virtual learning environments? Okay, it's generally sort of there we go. It's generally sort of a catch-all phrase really for basically any kind of technology or method of communication that doesn't involve sitting face-to-face in a classroom. I think really it's something that's definitely going to affect higher education more and more over the next few years. I mean, we should sort of be thinking along them terms anyway. We all kind of, or most of us grew up with getting the TV times, and if you missed a programme when it was on, that was it, you didn't have time to catch up. But we kind of live with a generation of people now, as students, who don't kind of want to fit into that kind of 9-to-5 regulated model. If you want to watch a film, they'll download it when they want to. If you want to watch, hands up, I can't remember the last time I watched something on TV when it was scheduled. I either watch it online, I use catch-up player or anything like that at all, okay? So we kind of got a generation of people who are getting used to doing things on the move when it suits them, okay? And like it or not, a lot of students don't think of university as being in work. I'm not saying you don't work at university, but work is a traditional, well, 9 to 5 for some people, maybe 6 to midnight for others, or that kind of regularity. But kind of education, a lot of students go into education to kind of avoid that regularity for a little bit longer. And I think we're talking about sort of encouraging creativity and development. Always, it's like Beatles fans, always had to throw in a Beatles reference in somewhere. I loved it when we were talking about trying to make Let It Be, and he sort of said he was stuck in this cold warehouse working 10 in the morning till 6 in the evening, and all he did was fight and argue. Because you can't write music, you can't be creative, you can't kind of think outside the box. If somebody says you've got to sit here between 10 and 6, that's when you're going to be creative. Again, from my point of view, I'm rubbish in the afternoons. I've always done jobs that involve me working very early in the morning or coming in and doing sort of till silly o'clock in the morning, 6 till midnight, 7 till 1, 8 till 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I work best. If I'm doing essays, I can't do it in the day. So if I've got kind of study time or anything, generally 9 o'clock at night, I can bang them out, no problem, because that's when my mind works best. What does interactive virtual learning environments allow us a little bit? Well, sort of move on to the advantages. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but it does allow that flexibility to a degree as well. From the student point of view, they can kind of work. We talk about learning strategy, we talk about delivering programs that suits the student, but we don't kind of sort of say, well, you've got to be here between 9:30 and 4 o'clock and do your best thinking and creativity then. So, we can sort of move forward a little bit with this. Tools that we can use, well, again, a lot of us are still fixed on the whole traditional desktop. You sit on your computer in an office or a dedicated space in a house typing away. And again, we're really moving away from that. If you look at sales of traditional PCs, they've all plummeted. Again, don't know how many of you got smartphones, got an iPhone in my pocket. My first computer was a Commodore 64. I loved it. But compared to what I've got on my iPhone now, I mean, I could have had a whole room full of Commodore 64s and it wouldn't have touched 1% of the technology I carry around in my pocket with me. Talking about the development of pads, different sort of ways that we access the internet, how we access the virtual world that we sort of live in and that. So virtual learning environments, as I say, covers a whole way of communicating with students on different media. So I've sort of talked a little bit about the kind of positives already. Okay, convenience is definitely one of them. Deciding when you access a session, when you look at it, when you sort of read, when you use it as a revision tool. Accessibility, and we're talking about being well, we did used to talk about before the current government about education reform, being able to access all different sort of parts of society, people with different abilities. So it does allow us to reach out to, if you like, non-traditional or people who wouldn't consider going to university or higher education, or, you know, different ways of sort of learning and that. And kind of the whole interactivity, we talk about learning strategies, we've kind of moved a long way from the traditional rota, kind of parrot learning, big lecture theatres, I say, you do kind of thing, and people being more involved with sessions, you know, sort of visual learners, and sort of virtual learning environments allow you to be more interactive, to actually engage with the learning material, the teaching material, so there's sort of definite positives there. Negatives just depend on your access, and again, a lot of this technology isn't particularly cheap. You know, things like your iPads and that, you know, it's not cheap to sort of keep into. You know, if you run out of sort of not bandwidth, data and everything, then you're stuck for the rest of the month unless you top up. Confidence. Always used to say it takes a lot of courage to say that you can't read. I worked for lots of years in paediatrics and passed along complex instructions to parents of children with different complex needs and everything. There's really a real danger to be able to say it's fine, we can just pass them a leaflet. We can give them the medicines, you can read what's on the side of the bottle. I think it's always a dangerous presumption to assume that someone can read. In my experience, it takes a lot of courage for adults, if you like, to say they can't read. It's a dangerous presumption to think that everybody is confident using IT. You know, as we move to a more sort of interactive world, some people must feel like they're getting left behind a little bit. So it is dangerous to assume that, and again, it takes a lot. Actually, I'm dead rubbish with computers. I don't even know how to tell. I'm scared to touch the plug in case I break it, you know. And then a bit of isolation as well, okay? We're talking about virtual learning environments, somebody sat on their own in isolation, on a laptop, on a pad, whatever it is. And it's quite interesting. One of the biggest issues that business have with young people now isn't so much to do with their maths and their English skills and things like that. The big problem is their ability to interact in a social environment with strangers, because a lot of their interaction is done online. So there's very little development of face-to-face contact. Things like Facebook and Twitter, you can have massive communities of people chatting to each other, but if you put them in a room together, there'd be very little interaction and communication. Them social skills you develop to speak to complete strangers and put them at ease very quickly. I always think, again, one of the things with education, a slight cliche, but just a kind of education for education's sake, that exploring new experiences, meeting new people, picking up different perspectives, different points of view and that. And if somebody's sort of stuck in front of a screen, wherever they are, then they're not getting that experience of mixing and interacting with other people. So it's trying to sort of get the balance right a little bit, isn't it? So a bit of background, just to focus, sort of a bit of background around virtual learning environments, and just to sort of think a little bit more just specific to my area of study. If any of you used Wimber here? I think a fair few probably have, haven't they? Yeah. It's definitely improved, I think, particularly as they've increased bandwidth. I started using it a couple of years ago, and it was very stop and start, particularly if you got to the afternoons. It's a nightmare. It's kind of America came online, it kind of just crashed, but it's much better than it was. I've used it in delivery of a master's program for paediatric advanced practice. A particular module I took was pathophysiology, which I'll touch on a little bit more shortly. What Wimber allowed us to do was deliver a program that was fairly unique in the UK, advanced paediatric practice, from the Shetland Islands to the Isle of Wight, and also students in the Republic of Ireland as well. Imagine trying to deliver a program that it meant you needed to be in university 2.5 to 3 days a week, but then students from all around the country who would never, even though it was the best program, the ideal program that suited their needs and the needs of different health authorities, there's no way they were going to pay for students to live in Liverpool for half a week for 12 months. But Wimber allowed them to access the course from their own, where they lived, their place of work and that. I guess there's slightly advantage in that when I started teaching, I was using Wimber straight away, so I kind of didn't learn any other. I learned to teach in a classroom, but I didn't have to learn one, started teaching then, so I realised that Wimber was there and sort of work with that. I'd heard quite a few things anecdotally from students, and it did kind of pique my curiosity a little bit anyway. But for those who are unfamiliar, it's dead straightforward. This is a screen grab, essentially. Whatever, if I was delivering this, in fact, I should have set up a Wimber room to show you, shouldn't I? Hindsight's great, isn't it? Anyway, so your slide would be on your desktop there, okay? You have a little sort of interactive bar at the bottom. You have a list of who's there. You can sort of tick, put your hand up, smile if you agree on that. You can text questions and stuff there. One of the skills of being a lecturer using Wimber is to make sure that you do engage people who aren't in the classroom. So kind of keeping an eye out when you ask a question, sometimes directing it to those at home rather than in a classroom, giving them a chance to answer there. And if you so wish, they could have your picture up as well. I'm sure most of my students shrunk that bit. Okay. Modular arts teaching is understood to be a fairly complex module anyway, pathophysiology. Okay. And the problem being that nurses have different levels of experience or knowledge of physiology, pathophysiology, how the body works. Like all professions, you kind of get your basic education, you've got your basic training, then you specialise in different areas. Okay. And then you come to do further training, suddenly they need to be experts in all parts of the body. So certainly quite a complex area, different sort of levels of understanding prior to the course. I just wondered what the difficulties would be with them familiarising themselves with the technology as well. Okay, I'm used to using the microphone, I'm used to sort of webcams and stuff through work and that. But if you've only ever used the internet for a quick 5 minutes on Facebook or to do your shopping once a month, then suddenly having to download all this stuff and utilise it could be a bit daunting. And I did wonder a little bit, did students focus initially on understanding the technology rather than the needs of the programme and the particular module itself. So the research I carried out at Safe at the PG set was just to focus on the student experience rather than the course content itself. The methodology, I think we need to consider it as more a pilot study more than anything else. It was quite a small enclosed group of participants that were used. And they're all students who were rolled onto the nurse practitioner programme. Now, they were all extremely experienced nurses, practitioners, so they weren't newly qualified. They'd have been qualified for at least 5 years, majority of cases 15 plus years because of the nature of the programme. Having worked within the NHS for that long, it could be always dangerous to make presumptions, but a certain presumption that they were familiar with IT technology. Can't work within the NHS at any level now without some interaction with IT. And there's no randomisation carried out, so it's more kind of a qualitative study rather than an experimental study I was looking at. And there's no power calculation designed either, okay? I had kind of a set number of students to ask, and that was where I was with. Decided to use a questionnaire. Am I doing all right for time? Yeah. Decided to use a questionnaire, generally because they're cheap to use. Okay, everyone's got to count the pennies these days. Fairly easy to run, very easy to distribute, and I used the Bristol Online survey tool, which again I found really useful to sort of set up and send out and everything. And I used a mixture of questions really, some nice closed questions, get some specific data, yes or no, a couple of short answer ones, and scoring on Likert scales. I did put the questionnaire out to the peer learning group at first and kind of thinking, do I need a bit of background data? Sort of ask questions around sort of age and gender. There were only 2 males in the group, so for me to have put out consent forms saying this is a confidential study, and then there's 2 males and 48 females, then I kind of already at risk of breaching confidentiality. Would it make a difference to the information I got as well? And age as well. I forget I'm not in my 20s anymore, you see. Having been in my 40s, I still think I'm dead young and I'm dead into IT. But obviously when you get to your 40s, and obviously you're not, and I think, oh, actually, no, that's a really bad presumption to make. So you never realise you have kind of hidden subconscious, not prejudices, but opinions sometimes, do you? And suddenly you sort of put it down like that, and your peer learning group goes, so why are you presuming the older they are, the less confident they're going to be with technology? And go, oh, I don't know. So I thought, actually, yeah, I'd take them out. So that's quite good feedback from the peer learning group, and also, of course, the self-reflection as well. I'll put my hands up to that one. There were 50 questionnaires sent out and 21 responded, so 42% return rate. Yeah, which to the Daily Mail is a vast majority of the population, isn't it? But yeah, I was really, really pleased with the return, and I didn't bribe them or anything. Okay, I promise. I think when you consider, particularly within NHS staff, often it's 22% at most. I figure it's probably like our students, having worked in the NHS, you get just fed up of questionnaire after questionnaire after questionnaire, particularly when you think it doesn't matter what I put down, nobody's listening, it makes no difference. So I was very pleased with that kind of result. So the results, the majority describe themselves as moderately confident in IT. I think treat this as a pilot. It'd be probably quite nice to revisit this and actually establish a little bit what do we mean by moderately confident. Why are you not saying actually I'm really confident with IT? Is it that whole British Reserve, or I'm okay at computers, I'm not that good, or actually are they really good at it? There's one respondent who had no confidence in IT technology, and kind of throughout they were extremely negative, full stop. They wouldn't really want to use a course like this again. They felt they had no confidence. It came across quite a few underlying issues with virtual learning environments for them. I was interested in how people had developed their IT skills. So I asked a little bit around, had they done any formal training in the European computer driving license? Had they done any formal training at school or anything like that? And I think like the majority of us, it's kind of very much hit and miss. You kind of learn trial and error, isn't it? How we learn to use IT, use Word, use Excel, etc. It's not necessarily a bad thing as such. I say to people with computers, you can't break them. As long as you don't save, or you save everything, then you're okay. But what you do miss out on is the shortcuts or the easy way to do things, the best way to use the technology. If you do make a mistake or you lose work, how can you get that work back and everything? Again, it's sort of pros and cons from that. Say, only one student had previous experience of Wimber, so it was new for the vast majority of the students on there. I asked about previous internet use. Now, bear in mind, this is a couple of years old now, and Twitter was just starting to take off then. I'd imagine if I asked the same questions again, it'd probably be a very different answer. Again, the same with things like gaming, etc. Bingo websites, gambling websites have taken off, and again, you look at the demographics of people who access bingo, poker websites and everything. It crosses across all swathes of the population. Okay, it's not your traditional cloth cap going into the bookies on a Saturday afternoon by any stretch. Okay, but say, bear in mind, a couple of years out of date, but shopping, banking, Facebook were all sort of scoring quite high. I'd imagine that. Well, I'll talk about the result, general comments in a little bit. I thought this was again, dangerous presumptions. There's always sort of presumption that if a trust was seconding somebody and they needed to upgrade technology, there might have been a bit of financial support there. Majority of them who had to upgrade, there was nothing. So again, we're saying to students that they had to outlay to be able to access the program effectively. Okay, either to update their PCs, to update their internet connection, increase. And I know, again, this is a couple of years out of date. I know broadband, generally speeds are increasing across the country. But again, that financial implication, and again, particularly main thing about how tight finances are for most people. The majority of students flitted between coming into classroom for some sessions and using Wimber for other. Because one of the things that was interesting, if they felt they were disadvantaged if they were using Wimber compared to the students who were based within the class. Reasons why students would use Wimber. For those who live far away, it was purely distance. Others, it was just convenient. Rather than travelling 20, 25 miles, they could do the school run, around the corner and be back and have a cup of tea waiting for the class to start. As I say, why not? If you're in a better frame of mind doing that, then dropping the kids off at preschool club and then trying to fight your way through 20 miles of traffic on the M62 or whatever it is, are you really in the right state of mind to focus on picking up quite complex data at 9:30 in the morning? I suspect the answer for most is no. Other reasons, again, were work commitments. So these were all full-time staff that were seconded. mixed with full-time and part-time, particularly those who are part-time. There's sometimes when you would have to cover shifts. So again, it allowed them to catch up a little bit with sessions. So I've already sort of said that all but one stated they would attend the course again. Asking about participation in class, all the students felt that they did participate. Again, it'd probably be interesting, because I deliver most of the sessions on this programme, again, anecdotally, I think it depended on the lecturer's familiarity of actually using Wimber as to how effective the students felt they were able to participate. Being aware that I'd often act as a facilitator, I'd sort of sit in if I had an outside lecturer and sort out the IT side, so they could just deliver the session. I would know that people wanted to ask questions and catch up on queries and stuff. Again, sort of, about 40, just under half, felt that those just using Wimber purely, without any being in class face-to-face, did feel that there was a disadvantage. And about a third were fairly neutral on that question as to whether it was plus or a minus using Wimber. Free text comments on advantages kind of reflect a little bit of the preamble I put earlier on, looking at some of the research, the evidence is already around. Basically, able to attend and participate without the physical travel. But a big thing was these kind of archived sessions. If you like archives, a bit like your iPlayer, your BBC iPlayer or your Sky Plus, and that you come in and then you just play through the sessions, and they're broken up into chapters. They quite liked it as a revision aid as well, particularly if it was an area of physiology they weren't too keen on. So if, say, they're a renal nerve specialist and I'd done a session on musculoskeletal system that they really were unfamiliar with, then they could kind of watch the renal system once, but they were fine with that, but watch another area a couple of times to sort of really get under its skin and that. So that was definitely a big plus, was, as I say, using it almost as a Sky Plus. Disadvantages, technical problems was a big one. The system crashing, as I say, it has improved since then. The sound not always coming through very well, but again, I know that the university responded to that and set up kind of dedicated Wimber rooms and did improve the sort of microphone and the sound technology and that. And again, just a sort of time lag. It's a bit, you know, when you see them interviews sometimes on TV and you get a bit embarrassing because somebody asks a question and then 10 minutes later you finally get the answer to the question that was asked 5 minutes. So a little bit of that occurred sometimes. And again, you need to be familiar with the technology of using it to sort of get around that. Difficult to participate. What students didn't like particularly was if there was, you started talking in class. Again, it's not, I'd imagine if I asked this, it'd be a different answer because we have the microphones in class that picks up all the noise in class. But generally, the one microphone would be the one attached to the lecturer. So you may suddenly start a bit, as with, you know, if you're delivering any session, sometimes you go off on a bit of a tangent, don't you? Because something grabs someone's attention and somebody brings their experience in. The students at home felt they did miss out on that a little bit. It's kind of like, what can you type it in? And it's very hard for a conversation to flow if you're then trying to type in what people are saying or answered several different questions. So it kind of caused a bit of a stutter along there sometimes. And then trying to use problem-based learning, small groups, a lot of the students found it quite difficult in the kind of breakout rooms. But whether that was just unfamiliarity with using Wimber, the technology, or just the fact that they found it difficult being on their own in a room trying to talk to somebody else, wasn't too clear. So I say the problem with any of these sort of debates, I know research is out of date as soon as it's published, but with IT, it's moving so quickly now. And again, I know it's a cliche, but literally whatever you sort of read about information technology, about broadband speeds, about what the internet can and can't do, is the next week it's already out of date. So this information's sort of 18 months to 2 years out of date already, really. With time it's sort of collected research, written up and got it all sorted. Across the country, bandwidth speeds are improving, and I know sort of Wimber has improved a bit. I still think that, you know, it's designed for the traditional desktop. I think Wimber just it'd be great on a little smartphone or your pads and everything, which a lot more people are using now. So it's kind of almost falling behind the technology. I think from us as educators, lecturers, I think the problem is we're often led by the technology. rather than us leading the technology. I think how we teach within virtual learning environments, we're still trying to figure out, because we're developing our theories of teaching, or, you know, how do we teach online with the technology that's available, instead of being a couple of steps ahead and thinking, actually, what could we do next time? How could we use that better? It's not just a problem, it's a problem across all major organisations. Again, having worked in the NHS for long enough, it's just constantly lagging behind. As soon as you pour several billions into one programme, one structure, one idea for IT, it's already money down the drain because something else has come out or problems have popped up in that. I'd say from my point of view, I treat it sort of more as a, I guess, a pilot study, and it'd be kind of nice to, I guess what would have been nice if there was time and it wasn't such a small study, would actually to sort of take some of them answers and maybe just sort of do some conversations, some interviews with some of the participants as well, and kind of drag out a little bit more information from some of them answers, see what was kind of, maybe pull out a few more themes from there. Just a few, the one that was on didn't have any references or anything, that was anything missing, so just a few sort of references and that there, okay. So say, just a brief run through, and I know it's the last one of the day, so I tend to sag a bit, but any questions or anything?